Hi, in this video I'm going to show you how to create a basic website like this using Dreamweaver Creative Cloud. Creative Cloud, things are a little different, so try to stick with me as we learn the ins and outs mainly of the new CSS Designer they have. So in Creative Cloud I'm going to go to File, and go to New, and I'm going to make sure HTML is my page type, HTML5 is my doc type, and I'm going to hit Create. I'm going to do a File, Save As. In this project, I'm actually just calling this the Netiquette page. So I'm going to go into my 502 folder, which is in my tech folder, and I'm going to save that. And the next thing I do is I try to give a title right away, just so I don't forget. Now that I have the basics set up here, I'm going to add the basic structure. You can do that, for instance, with the Insert panel if you don't see it. You can go to Window. You can also do it through Insert Div. But here, if I just hit Div, I can add a div, and this one I know I want to be called Container ID. So that looks good. And then I'm going to put my cursor in here, and I'm going to delete all this text. I'm going to make sure my cursor is still in there, and then if I go down here, under structure, I can see I can add a header. And I'm not going to add any ID or class for these. I'm then going to add an aside. I'm going to add a section, and I'm adding a footer. Okay. So if everything looks right, I could take a look over here, and it doesn't exactly. So this is where I'm going to go down, and I'm going to actually undo it because I went too fast. So I want you to see what happens. So there's the side. So what I should have done is, all right, so then I'm going to hit header. I'm going to hit OK, and take my cursor and put it right after it. I'm going to hit aside, hit OK, put my cursor right after it, and I'm going to hit section, okay, and then cursor right outside of it, and do my last one, my footer. Okay. So now I tend to like to clean up this text, mainly because it helps me just get a better idea of my page. So I know that's my main section, and this is my header. And my header, I know I'm just going to have it be called Netiquette and the online. I'll just call this classroom. I'm going to take one other step right here where I already have this, and I'm going to make it an H1. So now if I go over here, if I actually go to complete code view, I can see, and sometimes I like to go down here to this apply source formatting, and it can sometimes clean up, but I can see I basically have a div that's called ID container. Within that, I have a header tag and a side tag, a section tag, and a footer tag. And so your code should look like this so far. Alright, so with that in place, what I start to do now is I start with my CSS. So I'm going to go to the CSS Designer, and the first thing that I need to do is I'm going to make sure I have the body tag selected, and I'm going to go up to here, and I need to hit the plus sign, and then I hit create a new, and I don't have one created, so I'm going to actually hit browse, and I'm going to go to the folder that I like to save my CSS, and depending on how you have your site set up, yours might be different. So in this case, I want a folder called styles, and I'm going to call this Netiquette. And there it is. Okay, so that looks good. And so now I'm going to basically ignore media, because that's if I was using multiple style sheets from multiple basically screens, and I'm not. So with Netiquette CSS selected, I'm going to hit plus, and body shows up, so that looks good. And I go down here, and this is where I'm going to first start with my background for my body. And so I know in this case what I want this to be, so let me. Okay, so that looks good. And I could go ahead and set up a few other things if I wanted to. For instance, I could set up a body font for the whole page. So I could say by default, I want the body, the font family to be, we'll say Gotham. And maybe I want the font size to be by default 15 pixels. Okay, so that's my basic set up, and that looks good. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to click over here and I'm going to make sure container is selected, because now I'm going to add a background for my container. So I click on background, and my container, I'm going to actually have it be a different color now. Let me type this in real quick. Sometimes when I talk and type it doesn't work as well. Okay, so I'm going to undo that, because what I wanted to do was to make sure my container was selected. So let's take a look at this and make sure we have this right. Okay, so I have container. Here, let's go back to source code. So you got to make sure. So I have source code, I click here, I click container. For some reason the CSS isn't showing up. So if that ever happens, I just find it, make sure it's there. Okay. Plus sign container. You go down here. Okay, so that looks right, but it also looks like my body might have been messed up. So I never am afraid to go over here and fix things from the code view. So I'm going to go to body AB7124. I believe was what that should have been. And the thing is, you always make sure you have to be careful with your semicolons and everything. That looks good. So now I'm going to go back to source code. I'm going to make sure I have the middle selected, container, and I'm going to go down here, and I want to do a couple things here. I'm going to first add a margin, and so I'm not going to worry about the top, right? But I want to add a margin of 10 pixels on the left. Actually, let me rephrase that. I want my left and right to be auto, and this is for my margin. I was thinking padding. I always like to get those two mixed up in my head. And then padding is what I was going to say. I want to be 10 pixels on the left and 10 pixels on the right. Okay, it's looking good so far. I'm going to work my way up from the bottom. I'm going to select footer. I'm going to make sure Netiquette selected. I'm going to hit the plus sign. I'm going to actually make this a little more specific. And I'm going to select down here. And here, the main things that I want is I want to use a font, and I can click something like that and then drag it for a lighter one if I want. But basically, I want a font that's going to show up but be not as strong. So really could be anything right here. But more importantly, what I wanted to do, because sometimes you find you have to adjust that, is I want to basically choose a font size. I lost it, so now I go back to footer. Let's go back down to font size, 10 pixels, 10, and then down here, text align, center. So there I have my basic there. And I can see that's not quite the color already, I can tell. So what I'll play with right now is just using the same as my body background. So I will do AB7124, and we can see what that looks like. And for now, that looks good. So then I'm going to click on my side. And my side, what I want to do is I'm going to have it float to the right. So I'm going to select CSS. I'm going to hit plus. There's my side. Select down here. And this is where I first want to choose my width. And right now I'm really using a fixed width for this page. There are multiple ways that you can do it, and you'll learn later in this course other ways to have a more responsive design, but I find that when you're just beginning, it helps to focus on fixed widths. Okay, so I'm going to come down here. I'm going to add basically a 10 pixel margin for now around it, and I'm just using the tab to jump around in here, and I'm going to do the same thing with padding. and I want it to float right. Okay? And the thing that I can already tell is I never added on my container a width. So let's go ahead and do that. So let's go to here. I'm going to go to pixels. I'm going to change that to 960. Okay? So you can see now here's the side off here. Now if I want to work on that a little more, so for instance I can add a background color to my side. So I'm going to do £sign 96A88B. Okay, and then I could do a few other things if I want to here. So if I go back up here, more specifically, this is where you can choose a border color. So let's go with the black border color. And border width, let's go with thin just for now. And border style, let's go with solid. Okay. So now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all the text that I have in this document, so I already have that. I'm going to just paste it in here. Alright, so now let's save all and preview in Safari. Okay, so this is the original, right? And so this is a similar version. And so there are a few things that I noticed. The margin up top could be 0. I need to add some headings. I need to add some space, but for the most part, you can already see the basic components of it coming together. So working our way through this, what we're going to do is, and I'm going to actually do it from here, is I'm going to go to my container, and I have my, I'm going to do margin top, 0 pixels, and then my header. So I have a few options here. I could do it for the container, or I could also even do it for the H1 tag. So let's just focus on that. So there's I select the CSS I want. Select here. I want to make it shorter. I go down here, and this is where if I go down to my margin top, I could add a 20 pixel at the top, and it should give me some space. So let's take a look and see if that accomplished what I want. And it looks like neither of them did exactly what I want. So for now, let's jump in here and make sure everything looks right. Let's just do it padding then. I'm going to go up here and I'm going to make sure that looks right. And while we're here with the H1, one of the things we can do too, make sure it's selected. So right, Netiquette H1 is if we select here, we can go with font family. Now notice that you have all these options, but let's say these aren't really the ones you want. A quick and easy way is to, once it's added, you can then go in here and let's say Verdanda is the first choice I want. So by changing that, that changes that to Verdanda, and that looks good. But I want to do a few other things here. I want to add a color. Alright, so I'm going to basically do 666. Should be a shade of... Okay. Let's go up and take a look. And it's not quite what I want, so let's try there. You get those numbers sometimes confused. Now the other thing I can do while I'm working on my header is I can add a bottom border. So here's a border, and so you start looking for the bottom border. So you start with the color, and if I do, I could just work with that same color scheme. But then I need to look for border bottom width. Alright, we'll just do 1 pixel thin. Keep moving down. Border style, but I want border bottom style, and I want it solid. Let's save all. We're going to preview it now in Firefox. It's always a good habit to check different browsers and compare how it looks from browser to browser. Okay. So basically now I'm going to go through. Let's take one more look. See what's going on. So header's not showing up there. So let's do that once more. Select that. Select header. Here. Plus sign. Go down to border. Bottom border, we're going to put the color. Bottom border width, going with thin. Bottom border style, we'll go solid. Okay, there we go. That's what we're looking for. Now with these others, I'm just going to go through and make them an H2 tag. And whenever you see that happen, right, the first key is to take a look at your code. It usually just means the way that, in this case, I pasted all the text in there, it got a little funky. So what I can do is I can undo this, right? So in this case, it's often easier just to add that H2 by hand. Alright, so it closed it. And Dreamweaver often tries to help you when you're hand coding. Some people like it, some people hate it. But you see there, that goes. So just gonna, in my case, right, I could bring that over, and you notice that when I do that now, what should happen, right, when I do that, it seems to work. Right, so it just has to do with how the original text is formatted more than anything. So almost done. Okay, there that is. So we're going to do a couple more things here. So you notice that this padding looks off, basically the space. So I'm going to check first the container and see that I did a padding left and right, and I did a margin. And so I'm going to change that down to 5 pixels right now and see what that looks like. Still seems like a lot. We'll go down here a little more. Just double checking everything. Still looks a little off, but nothing's jumping out. So we're going to add 1 pixel for now. Going to go to here. I'm going to save all. I'm going to click on container and do a different approach here with the borders. So I'm going to go down to the borders. Alright, so this is where I must have earlier thought I was working on the heading. And so I'll fix that in a minute by hand. But what I want to do is show you how I can do a right and a left. Right? So there's that. Right? Go down here, left. Solid. Solid. Alright, let's see what we missed here. There it is. So right, we're going to do, in this case, 1 pixel. Left, 1 pixel. Alright, so you notice we have some of these other things. So always be aware that sometimes you can easily just go over here and see, alright, border bottom, border left. So that was the border that was given me the problem earlier. I probably wasn't paying attention. And that's the hard thing about when you're beginning web development, is if you miss one little detail, it can really throw you off. So hopefully, this gives you a basic idea of how important it is to slow down and check as you go. I will often even try to validate my code as I go. So if I go to HTML or source code, I can go down here to validate. Click there, click OK. And it'll show me if I have any errors, and then I can go ahead and try to address those. So far, I don't have any. So that's looking good. So now, let's close this. Let's preview this. Okay, so far, definitely the side could use a little bit. We could arguably make that bigger. There's definitely something with the top going on with the margin, but everything else, the main things are we have to improve the carp with the heading, and we can do that. And we can add some text here. So let's get back to Dreamweaver. Let's work our way down and see if anything stands out. Sometimes, especially when you're hand coding, all it takes is one little error to throw things off. So often when I'm looking down here, I'd be looking for pink semicolons to make sure everything looks right. So one of the things I do remember what I wanted to do was make this margin more like 30. So we'll come back to that. So in this case, I'm going to do header, margin, okay, let's save all. Still a couple funky things going on, but let's go ahead and finish out the headings. So H2, I click on that, make sure Netiquette selected, I hit the plus sign. So it looks like there's a block quote somewhere. So that could be part of the problem that's going on with at least that spacing that I'm noticing. And so that right there is a lesson that it's not always, assuming that's the problem, it's not always an issue of your CSS. Sometimes the issue is actually in your HTML and you don't even notice it right away. Alright, so what I'm going to do is go to this, and I'm working on my H2, so I want to make sure I have 0, and I'll just go ahead and 0 for both. Okay, but now what I want to do is do the same thing. I'm going to make sure I have paragraph, so I click paragraph. You got to remember to do this with the plus sign. This is where you can at times get totally thrown off. Alright, so I'm going to start off with 0 pixel for those two. And let's go take a look and just see if we, see, didn't even enter it in, so I think I went too fast. But basically I'm wanting to do margin, top, 0 pixels, margin, top, 0 pixels. Okay, for margin top, actually that's margin bottom, see? And that's what you want. Now, you could sit there and play with this and be like, I really actually want a little white space there. And you could do something like that. So my mind's on this block quote, which I don't remember doing, and I'm not sure what caused that, but that's okay. So we'll go through, fix this. I'm just going to copy the text from here, just to add in here. just to be quick, because I'm assuming you already have this text. Okay, so it's looking funky right now. I don't always freak out. Actually, I never freak out because it's not worth freaking out about. But so here, this is a look at it, but this is where you might decide that you want to really play with the width. It might be that the side needs to just be wider. So I can go to a side, and I'm going to make this 250 pixels here. All right, so I'm going to leave that for now, and I'm going to make this in H3. And for now, I'm just going to, I don't remember the exact example. I'm going to do 2 here. And you can see that's an example where it got a little funky because of how that was done. So that's another one of those where I'll just hand code it. Makes life easier than trying to wrestle it another way. Okay. Save all. And preview. So definitely the container needs, there's some padding issues here, and there's still something that's causing that to be upset, but hopefully you see that this is a real quick version of this. Now I guess we should, before we wrap up, show you how to add a learner description. Those are often helpful, and sometimes doing the class throws people off. So I'm going to actually just add it here. And I'm going to try to get the text. Okay. So when I have something like this, there's a couple ways that you can do it. I'm going to just add a spam tag around this. And I'm going to then go over here, and when I click on it, I can click on spam, the spam tag. I can click Netiquette. I hit plus. Right, and this is what comes up. But what I want is I want to actually add a class. So I'm just going to call it learner. And in this case, I'm going to change the font color to something like that. And I will do the font size. In this case, I'll use something like that. All right. So you notice it didn't do anything. But if I keep having that selected, right, if I click it that way, then here I should be able to choose learner, and there it goes. So that's the basic idea there. Before we wrap up, let's just take one last look. Not going to spend a lot of time troubleshooting this, but let's see what the container. All right, so don't have anything going on there. So I'm going to add margin top 0 pixels, and then here it was that block quote that was throwing us off earlier, so let's add that back. And let's take a look and see how we're looking. So now back to Firefox. Definitely need to add some space. We'd have to deal with that a little more. But overall, this looks pretty good. I mean, if the last 2 things I would probably do would definitely add, for my H1, margin top, we'll say 20 pixels. And that probably would be the last. The other thing I might do is I might make that font just a little bigger. So font size. So now let's preview. Okay. Overall, this looks pretty good. Definitely would want to spend some more time fine-tuning, but the real purpose of this was to give you the basic idea of how to use the new CSS Designer and Dreamweaver CC, because it is pretty confusing when you're brand new. This is something that, for me, it's a brand new way of using CSS and Dreamweaver. So for someone who's used Dreamweaver for a long time like me, it's almost like learning a new way of doing this. But hopefully this was helpful. Thanks.